All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Innovation Bay's regular Wednesday morning event series. I can't believe that this is number 8, so we have been doing it for a while. I am your host, Ian Gardner. I'm a co-founder at Innovation Bay and also a VC with Gelix Ventures. Also on the Innovation Bay team, Faden Stow is my co-founder. He's in Hobart, Sham Priest, our GM, and Claire Tester, our event manager, both in Sydney with me. As I said, this is the 8th one. Just to give some data around that, there's been over 2,500 people have joined us over this period. We've had 20 guest speakers, we've had VCs, we've had founders, we've had people across the ecosystem. We've even had a former prime minister. We've had, I think, 250 questions have come in, a bunch of activity on Twitter. It's been an amazing few weeks. So look, thank you to you all if you've been on one of these before. And welcome to anyone who's new. Speaking of that, if you are new to Innovation Bay, hello. You are in the company of some incredible people, not just, well, you guys, really. You people, we're working hard to achieve amazing things as an ecosystem. Innovation Bay, I think we're definitely the longest running community for tech startups and investors across Australia. We do events, programs, other kinds of content, and the whole idea is to provide opportunities to connect to like-minded souls. So yeah, welcome along. We couldn't do any of this without the support of our sponsors, so I'd really like to say a huge thank you to them. We've got AWS, IAG, Farmark Ventures, KPMG, High Growth Ventures, and Macquarie Bank. So they provide incredible support to us and the whole ecosystem. So check them out and use their services. So this is going to be the panel today, which is quite an awesome panel. There's tons of requests to talk about this topic close to my heart. So I'm very excited to hear this one. Now we're doing something new. It's not on this slide, but most of you who registered before about noon yesterday would have got an email from me saying that we're going to try something new. One of the things we miss when we do a virtual event like this is the sort of random, coffee queue style networking where you bump into someone and who knows what they could be. They could be a customer, a supplier, a staff member. You just don't know. That has kind of been removed in this the new lockdown and virtual events. So we're going to try it virtually. There's a Discord group that we're going to jump in at 9 a.m. if you want to. So if you're keen, I'm not going to go through the email. It's a little bit involved, but we will put the Discord server code in the chat. So if you do want to try that, then we'll see you at 9. Yeah, as I said, this is a very popular topic. So loads of people. I think we had almost 500 registrations in this one. So yeah, we've got I think the best and most active angel investors out there. So I'm delighted today. Let me stop my screen share and get to the panel. So let me welcome, I'm not going to do the intro. I'm going to leave that to Alan. So we've actually brought along a friend of ours, the real Alan Jones. It must be nice that Alan, that the imposter Alan Jones is retired from his radio show. So welcome to the real Alan Jones all the way from Newport. So Alan, you've done a lot for the ecosystem. You've been around, I think you're at least as old as I am. So you've been around for a long time. Very active angel investor. You've done a ton of stuff. So let me hand to you, Alan. I'm going to go on mute and take my video off, and I'll jump back with the questions. So audience, ask some questions either on Twitter. I think the chat panel's running. Yes, it is. So if you want to ask a question, do it there on Twitter, and I'll jump back in and field them later. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Sean, and thank you, Claire. Thank you all for trusting me today with the talking stick. I am representing the remarkable Tech Accelerator today for startups in the visibility space, and Accelerators is where I love to hang out. And in the past, I've been an angel investor, mostly in startups coming out of accelerators, all kinds of accelerators, as many as I can find around the country. But right now, I've stopped angel investing. I've put that on pause. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about today. But first, let me introduce our panel. Andrea Gardner is founder and CEO of Gelix Ventures. Gelix Ventures provides investors with access to curated investment opportunities. We have Kylie Fraser, who's the founder and a partner at Ananas Ventures, an investment syndicate for early stage companies. Matt Allen is an ex-founder himself and a chief technical officer, and is now an early stage investor through a fund called Pick and Shovel. And then we have Stu Lynn coming to us from Brisbane, who is a partner at Transition Level Investments and recently launched 1013, a syndicated investment platform. So the opening question today is to the whole panel, and that is to each of you. Are angels still investing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone continuing. What's going on, Matt?
I guess that pause was a little pregnant, but yeah, this year, 2020, we've done 10 investments, 8 new ones, and two second investments into some things that we've done. 2 of those were through Kylie's platform as well. So there's action happening out there.
So then, Kylie, you too are still investing, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I'm still investing personally, and we're still running deals through Eleanor. In fact, we've just done our first post-COVID investment, which was a follow-on round, but it was oversubscribed, and we're really delighted to have that kind of first data point from the kind of syndicated platforms that there is still money out there. However, there's certainly not as much. So out of my investor base, I went on this, mission to call as many of them as I could. And from those calls, I would say probably half have said, we just need to press pause for a bit longer. They'll come back. But there's definitely less capital out there than there was 6 months ago. You said it yourself, Alan, you 6 months ago, you were actively investing, but personal circumstances are different, and sometimes we just need to press pause. But we're still going.
Thanks, Kylie. Andrea, is Jellic still investing?
Am I unmuted now?
Sorry. You're unmuted now. And Stu, you can unmute too.
I agree with what they've said. I think there are a lot of angel investors now wanting to put, stash their cash under the mattress to wait and see. I think we already had a gap at that seed funding stage in Australia. And I think my guess is that's probably being exacerbated. Some of the funds, some of the more established funds do, they do write a small number of checks or small size checks for at the seed stage. But I think a lot of them now want to keep their powder dry so that they can they've got the reserves there to support their portfolio companies. And my guess is that that's also exacerbating that seed funding gap. But like Kylie, I think there are people that are still active. I've spoken to quite a lot of our investors, and, a lot of them are actively investing, having done 2 or 3 angel investments already this year. And I actually think it's an awesome opportunity to invest in the sort of, technology that enables adaptation to what will be and is becoming the new world order, the way we work, acceleration, gig economy, all that kind of thing. And there's still really good investment opportunities for those kind of look through the crisis investments, those longer term things that, there's great opportunities out there. We're hopefully going to take one out to our investors next week. And, the valuation is pretty awesome. And there's been a lot of downward pressure, I think, on valuations. At least I've seen some examples of significant downward pressure on valuations. And that provides a great opportunity for investors as well.
Thank you. Stu, is Transition Level and 1013 still investing?
Yeah, so we're definitely investing. In fact, we're in sort of late stage negotiations on 3 deals at the moment. So one's a follow-on and 2 new opportunities. So that'll be the first test that we do through 1013 of our investor network. So they're family offices and high net worth folks from around Australia. But I guess we've been pleasantly surprised by the positivity that's come out. So I guess the first month of when COVID hit, there was a significant amount of uncertainty in the market. And I think at that point, when the market's dropping, it was natural that people would sort of put a pause on the button for a month or so there. But post that, we've seen markets recovering and things of that nature. We've also seen, I guess, technology being a great category emerging. The Nasdaq's done really well, etc. And a lot of our investors, have a view that these are longer term investments, and they're also enabling in this current environment. And so, yeah, I would say that when we did a survey of all of our investors, about 25%, I think, had a more negative stance. And we were surprised that at the other 75% said they want to do the same or more. We're actually surprised that a lot said they were interested in doing more investing in early stage tech at this point in time. So yeah, there's definitely demand out there. The real litmus test is when we put our next deal out, which hopefully goes up either later this week or early next week. And that'll be, you know, where the rubber hits the road to see if people are actually happy to put their money where their mouth is. But we're still seeing some great opportunities in the market. And so, you know, we're actively investing in you know, sourcing new deals.
So Stu, let's stay with you for a moment, because you've touched on a point. The next area I'd like to explore is what might have changed if angels are still investing. And you've touched on the possibility that there may be investors out there who express an interest that they're still interested in investing and still keen to get going, but maybe when it comes time to cut a check or, you know, transfer the funds or sign off on the long form investment document, maybe then there'll be a pause. Is that what you think you might see with some of them?
Look, I hope we don't see any of that sort of bad behavior, I guess. Like, we've never had a default, touch wood, on folks that have committed. So basically we go out, you know, with a deal memo, and people and investors come and join us, you know, alongside Steve Baxter's family office with transition level. But yeah, just generally the view is, you know, hopefully they don't sort of pull the plug at the late stage once they're already committed, and we've never had that. So I'd hope we don't see that in the market where people have handshake agreements and, you know, with early stage companies and then sort of back away. I think it's more at the engagement stage. You know, you don't really have this serendipitous, you know, ability to meet new investors and things like that, go out for coffees and build relationships. And so it is a people's game in the early stage. You really want to get to know them and trust them and, you know, believe in their story. And that's a lot harder it's really hard to build that trust, you know, virtually. And so trying to find innovative ways to build those relationships with investors, you know, in this environment is going to be an interesting one. So I think that's probably more the challenge, rather than sort of people, you know, committing to things and then not sort of going in at the back end.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just to weigh in, I haven't seen any of that kind of bad behavior, as Stewie called it. You know, there's no term sheet pulling. It's just that difference between what people say they're going to do and what they're actually going to do. You can ask someone if they want to invest, and they're like, yeah, like, I'm down, I'm going to do more. But then you say, okay, give me some money. And they're like, oh, maybe I'll just do it in the next one, which is, you know, it's hard to say no. Everyone on this panel is extraordinarily good at it, because that's our job as angel investors, is to say no, you know, 99 times out of 100. But, you know, some of the people that invest with us, it's, you know, it's hard for them to say no early sometimes, and that's fine. That's why, you know, that's why it's great to invest through platforms as you're learning some of those skills.
And just from our perspective, speaking from April and I's perspective, rather than pick and shovel, is, you know, we've committed to keep our velocity up, which probably means a smaller check size. So it just means that the budget we have allocated is sliced a little thinner. So the check sizes are probably, you know, 75% or 50% of the size that they were. You know, that causes. And
do you think that affects valuation or round size, or does it? I think somebody else.
No, I'm not necessarily price sensitive, but it does mean that the founder will have to go out and find some more investors because there's less coming from us.
So I actually, sorry, I'm hogging. It's not my turn to speak, but I did warn you I was going to be an over talker today. I pulled the data from what happened with angel investing following the GFC, because lots had been said about what happened to venture capital after GFC, which kind of reached its bottom at 12 months after. Angel investing was actually different. The number of angel deals steadily increased, but the volume of capital deployed by angels slightly decreased, which kind of suggests that there are, you know, a fewer number of angels deploying into as many deals, but writing smaller checks, which goes to exactly what Matta was saying. You know, angels that are doing this for a living, we all know that we need to hit those diversification levels. We still want to invest in the same number of deals, but if fewer of us are writing those checks, or we're collectively writing smaller checks, then the volume will decrease, but the numbers should still stay the same. That's what happened after the GFC, and with luck, that's what will happen here.
I kind of saw a counterpoint, actually. Like, I was looking at the stats of like general investment sort of stages over the last, and basically looked in the last quarter versus the prior quarter. And so this is, January through to March. And what actually happened was, so venture capital dollars, globally are down, but the material one, which was really interesting, was that Series A onwards, so A, B, C, held pretty much the same volume and the same amounts of dollars, like, give 10%. Seed actually was the one that fell materially, and that was where the downward fall in terms of dollars deployed was. So that was quite alarming to see. And it probably does make a little bit of sense given what I mentioned before of like building relationships at the early stage, and people kind of moving up the chain given the level of risk. And so, I guess at 1013, we're looking at seed through to Series A, and haven't changed our check size at all. Our check size is around 750,000. But yeah, I guess that's where they're seeing, I guess that it is harder to raise capital at the earlier stage. And so, the reason we're on the call obviously today is how do we help sort of build that and make sure that we can get early stage companies funded.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Andrew, is that the same for you? You expect to write checks about the same size?
I think going back to what Stuart said earlier, the litmus test will be, when we take our first post-COVID deal out to our investors, which will hopefully either be later this week or early next week. I guess that's because our business model is that we have, 650 or something registered investors. And when we decide to invest, then we invite them to co-invest with us and build a syndicate that way. But I think there will be people that want to wait and see. And so I think there'll be less checks written. And so I think the aggregate size check that we can write is possibly smaller. Having said that, I think this is probably one of the best deals that we're about to take out to our investors, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I really hope that we'll have a great response for that. My concern with some of the talk I've heard about maybe the actual aggregate sort of check size written by angel syndicates being smaller is that at the moment, I think comfort, a reasonable level of comfort is to have 24 months runway. And it's not that often that an angel round's going to give you 24 months runway. And I think that just sort of injects an added layer of risk because there's still a lot of unknowns out there. We don't know whether we're going to have a second wave, and we don't know whether there's going to be an effective and mass deployed vaccine and things like that. There's a lot of unknowns at the moment, and so I think that long runway is really important. And I think it's going to be harder for angel, that sort of very early seed stage company to get enough runway in. So I think that's a bit of a risk factor that we need to consider.
Yeah, I feel like I expect to see individual angels like myself put things on pause, but that relatively speaking, angel groups will perhaps contribute as much as before because they'll be sort of led by the herd instinct. People won't want to miss out on a deal when they see the rest of the syndicate moving forward, and they'll feel reassured that they're not the only ones that think they might want to invest in this company. Do you think?
I don't know. I think actually our investors are remarkably independent thinkers. I think angel investing is quite an emotional thing. People invest in something that inspires them, something that they think that might change the world for the better, and it's in a way that inspires them. So they'll put their money where this is their risk money. They'll put the bet on something that excites them, and so. I haven't seen much of that herd mentality, to be honest. I think it's a normal thing, but it's interesting, like I would say I think we've got about 80 investors that have written a check, and more than half of those have written, 6, 7, 8 checks with us or more. But it's amazing that how disparate they are. They're not all in one company. It's very interesting.
Very interesting. So we're getting quite a bit of the same sort of line of questioning in the chat right now, which is to be expected. A lot of people are interested to learn about what might have changed about how startup founders need to approach you in the COVID world. We talked before about how it's harder to establish somebody's reputation, to build trust when we're all just on Zoom calls instead of sitting at coffee shops. what do you think might change? How can somebody optimize the way they approach you and your fund in these times? Maybe Matt, you want to throw that first?
Sure. I'm actually kind of enjoying being efficient. Going to the city and having meetings and traipsing around the place was, given that we generally work from home, was kind of inefficient. So, yesterday there was 10 Zoom calls, back-to-back Zoom calls are not always a lot of fun. But of those 10, I think 6 of them were new people that I hadn't spoken to before. So we're pretty, pardon me, we're pretty approachable. I think the pace with which things move with people you already know, with established relationships is quicker. There's less of the toing and froing. That said, it's normalized this stuff. Like, I actually don't know what location a whole bunch of those people were in yesterday. They were all in Australia, I think. So that's kind of interesting, right? Being Melbourne based and being kind of limited to talking to people in Melbourne, it was limiting scope for us to a degree, and that probably has opened up a little bit.
Cool. So how does a founder get onto one of your 10 Zoom calls in a day? How does that approach begin?
Yeah, you can go to pickandShovel.ventures, which is our new thing, which isn't actually up and running yet, to be clear. So I'm sort of representing just our little family here at the moment. So our direct angel investing, but I'm pretty easy to find, mostly on Twitter. Too much tweeting is the easiest way to find me.
So liking and replying to a lot of your tweets might get you up on radar.
Could do.
Alan,
Cool.
Alan, I just wanted to to be honest, I personally, and I'm really interested to hear the other panelists' views, but I think that the principles of how you get to be on the Zoom call or how you get in front of your potential investors is exactly the same. And I think it's really important that founders understand who they're pitching to, understand their audience. So understand that we're all really busy. At GeoSnapshot Ventures, for example, we receive 1,600 applications a year, and we're a tiny, tiny team. So the top of the funnel gets a really cursory look. It's pretty quick, and we go, that's interesting. We'll put it on that pile, we'll have a further look. No, that's not for us, it doesn't meet our investment criteria, and flick it on. So my suggestion is you work out what are your key your key value proposition, and you do your research on your investor. Invest that time and effort and work out whether there's is there any remote fit with their investment criteria, and don't hit them up if there's not, because there's just no point. It's a waste of your time and theirs. And if you do, and when you do send that email, if it's a cold email, remember that most of us, and I'm sure I'm speaking for the rest of you on the panel, people that bring opportunities to us that we respect, whose judgment we respect, those opportunities get a close look at. And those are really cold. You need to differentiate yourself somehow and engage. So what do? You do basic stuff like do your research and then show that you've done a little bit of research on that investor. I see that, you've invested in X and blah, blah, or whatever, or anything that actually shows that you've made a little bit of effort to tailor your application to the investor, to give them some motivation to putting a little bit more effort to look at your application.
Mm-hmm. Kylie, should people find people that are connected to you and get to know them first?
Oh, look, no, we are very happy to take cold applications. We've got a link on our website, eleanor.vc. You can email me directly, kylie@eleanor.vc. You just need, what we look for more than those warm leads is a real personal connection to your problem. Why is this your problem? And I want to be so excited by your excitement about this problem that, I just want to know more. So most of us are, by definition, we do this job because we are insanely curious creatures. Like, excite me. I always want to know more. Time is an issue. I would just say, like, a couple of practical post-COVID tips. The amount of decks that I've received that have said this is my pre-COVID deck, not good enough. Like, if you can't be bothered to update your deck, I can't be bothered to upread it. Like, I don't have a lot of time. I know you don't either, but you want my money, not the other way around. So make the effort. We've also put 3 additional screens on, which we've put on our website and on a blog. So I would expect to see those addressed in the materials that you send me, and you can see them in those places. But very quickly, can you acquire customers in this current environment, which is, kind of shorthand for, are you still growing? It's fine if you have a hibernation plan, but you're not going to hibernate with my money or my investors' money. That's not cool. Second is, do you have at least 2 years runway? Because, fundraising from external parties is going to get tougher. So we want to make sure you're set up to get through that, trough that we all expect is coming. And the third is the doozy. Is it as relevant in a post-COVID world? And we won't even try and talk about that, because we will just waffle on and no one knows what that is. But I want to know that you've thought about it. Like, I want to see what you think about that, because that's going to make me excited to talk about.
Those are 3 really great questions for everybody to keep in mind before they're approaching any angel investor in the Australian market right now. Stu, is that something that's on your mind, those 3 things?
Can you repeat the? I'm not sure which ones you're referring to with Kylie.
Sorry, mate. So
fast talker.
Yeah. Are you interested to know how much runway the companies have as part of your investment screening process? Do you need to see that they're still acquiring customers even though the recession's underway?
Yeah. Look, we're definitely focused on, cash is king at the moment. So making sure that, companies are being agile and thrifty with their capital and have a plan for, like, how do they extend runway? There's a whole bunch of options out there for government stimulus, etc. But it's how do you actually, that's probably not what we want to see people putting their hand out, rather than being more innovative and saying, what are opportunities here in front of us in this current environment, and how do we expand? I think that's definitely the case. But then also from a growth perspective, it's like, what are they doing in this current environment? Are they seeing it as an opportunity to win customers? So a good example is a company of ours called Arcade. They have frontline. They help enable frontline workforces. Obviously, in this environment, it's pretty tough, given no one's going to work in the retail sector, etc. But they changed their product to freemium and have had 3 times the number of signups, and now it's about delighting those customers and retaining them after their free trial runs out. So it's about, like, don't play the victim card here. Everyone's in the same boat. It's a tough environment for sure. It doesn't mean that you can't act. Another good example is Mr. Yum, based in Melbourne. They've been they are in venue ordering. We're not investors in them, but we've seen what they've been doing. It's really interesting. And if you ever think in-app ordering, at food and beverage, at restaurants, etc. And now all of a sudden they've clicked over and they're doing delivery, and they changed that over within 8 weeks, and they've fully replaced their whole revenue line. So this is the type of, like, things that you want to see from founders. You don't want to see them kind of sitting back saying, this is happening to us, and playing, and being victims. You want to see them, out there having a voice, thought leadership, trying to actually drive, engagement with their customers. Because the people that do that are the ones that are going to emerge as the winners, in a few years' time, when they were the ones that were acting, when everyone else was kind of sitting back with their hand out.
Sorry. I think I couldn't agree with Stuart more. We did say no to one that we were really excited about very recently. And ultimately it was because, although the tech was awesome and exciting and the applications were really huge and exciting, we just couldn't see any evidence of good commercial decision making in terms of extending runway. And it was like, oh, we're running out of runway, let's get investors to keep funding what was actually really, really fat salaries. And that really rang alarm bells for us. It's like, well, are they going to be able to make those commercial decisions going forward? So I think we're, as investors, we're all looking really hard at how the founders have responded to that crisis. How have they addressed identifying risks and then mitigating them, for example, running out of cash, and how have they gone about kind of discovering opportunities and leveraging them. And Stu, mate, yeah, he brought up a couple of good examples. We co-invested with Style Arcade, and yeah, a lot of our portfolio founders have blown us away in how well they're managing and responding to the crisis. And that's what we're looking for. Founders that are going to be able to, you know, roll with the punches as the company grows.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if I can summarize the thoughts of the panel, you know, one is that is the startup building a company that might thrive during the current conditions, continue to grow, continue to acquire customers, and also are they building a company that once the economy recovers can still survive in that? So I don't think you're looking for a hand sanitizer or a face mask manufacturers to invest in right now, right?
No.
There's a good question from Tony Surtees in the chat. Hi, Tony. And he's asking, is it of interest to look at investment opportunities to help a startup take advantage of acquiring people or assets such as brands or customer bases from other startups that can't be saved, that will go down? Should we be funding startups so that they can acquire or merge with other startups?
For sure. I mean, that's how the big end of town works. You know, like we need to take more lessons from how our grown-up cousins do things. You know, now is a great time to be acquisitive. You know, that there are bargains out there. We'd love to see people come to us with that kind of aggressive growth plan that involved more traditional M&A tactics. I'm an M&A lawyer by trade, so I would just like literally, if that is your plan, come to me. I will be so excited. But I've never seen it. I have not seen a single. And you know, we do seed to Series A, so it's very early. You would normally see that stuff further up the stack. In all my time angel investing, I have never once been pitched, please fund me so we can do this corporate action. I'd love to see that.
Okay, cool.
It happens less at the early stage, Alan. I mean, we've seen it starting to become like an agenda point for later stage companies that are pretty well funded. So I guess it's harder to say, like, you know, $1 million seed investment. Can I go and use that $1 million to acquire this company over here? Whereas, you know, I would argue, well, let's go look at that company to invest in them if that's the opportunity kind of thing. So I guess it just needs to stack up in terms of, like, you know, because also some of us, you know, I also used to work when mergers and acquisitions, and so not all of those work out. You know, in fact, quite a lot don't, and so, you know, there's clash of cultures and all of that type of stuff. So it really depends on the scenario from us, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So Matter, you're in touch with the engineering community out there. Do you expect to see a bit more liquidity in the developers available, in the technical co-founders that people might be able to find? Because that's always been a constraint on our market here, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. There's definitely it went from a seller's market to a buyer's market when it comes to sort of engineering people around at the moment. There's been a lot of good companies that, you know, unfortunately, when you're growing fast and you're running on venture capital, you have to, you know, your costs are far greater than your revenue a lot of the time, and people just want, you know, if their customer base disappeared, you know, there's been a lot of people that have been jettisoned. A lot of the big end of towns, a lot of people that have coming out of, you know, the MYOBs and some of these bigger engineering firms who, you know, if those engineers were playing it right, they might have a buffer. You know, they might be able to actually go out and their risk profile might have changed. So, yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the companies that I help, you know, which hiring engineers was a challenge up until 3 months ago, is now not become a challenge. In the fact, I I tweeted out something the other day for one of my portfolio companies and just got absolutely slammed by the amount of people who are interested in it, which usually it'd be crickets. So, you know, there's something changing out there, and, you know, there's a lot of good people looking for interesting things to do. There's a lot of good people just looking for something to do.
So there is an upside, but for founders who have a team, maybe now, you know, one thing to do right now is to invest in the relationship with that team so that they're less liable to start looking for opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you know, the biggest opportunity here, which, you know, you'd hope every single startup was doing anyway, but it's really just to refocus on those customers. You know, really hone in on who the customers are. I think when, you know, there's a lot of capital and things are good, then opening up the scope of who is your customer and sort of chasing a bunch of things is a little easier. when all of a sudden, you've got a potential cash flow issue coming down, to just to refocus and make sure your current customers are really happy and your new customers are probably closer to the shape of that current customer than sort of chasing a whole bunch of new ones, which, inherently chasing different shaped customers requires more product dev, which requires more people, which costs more money, and so on and so forth. So, what I've seen in all of us talk about our portfolios is like, cool, how do we just sort of get that focus back, which you'd hope everybody was done, but I think when times are good, focus is it gets a little wider rather than narrower.
Yeah, cool. We might go around the panel now and say, have you got 3 top tips for a business owner right now? Given that raising capital is likely to be hard for a little while, what else can we do to respond to the challenging climate to make sure that our business makes it through to the other side? Maybe we'll go with Stu first of all.
Yeah, look, I think like what we've done with a lot of our companies is really wargaming. So like scenarios just to understand. And I think like it definitely has helped over the last 2 months. I'd say like a month ago, a lot of businesses and business owners, founders were trying to understand what the outlook looks like. And I think at least there's a lot of uncertainties, as Andrea said before, but there is more clarity, and you're starting to see what your customers are doing and how they're reacting. And whether they're going to churn, whether they're going to double down and need more of your service, etc. And so I definitely agree with Matt on focus. So it's really about like narrowing down to the things that are really going to move the needle for the business. I think it's really the other point that very touched on, but really about engaging your team and making sure there's you don't want to be losing or churning your employees at this point in time. So it's really about how do you build a cohesive unit? Obviously, a lot of people, everyone, the majority are working from home. And so how do you make sure that you have keep up your business culture so that you come out stronger from this? I think look for opportunities in the, going forward rather than the victim piece you already talked about. And then I guess the last one, which I read The Hard Thing About Hard Things last year from Ben Horowitz. And he's an iconic sort of a VC in the US from Andreessen Horowitz. And he talks about, if you're going to eat a shit sandwich, you don't nibble around the edges. And so, you basically gobble it down and, get the hard stuff done. And so unfortunately there are hard decisions that need to be made, but don't sit on those decisions. You need to be a leader at these points in time. And sometimes hard decisions are required to save the business. And so
there goes everybody's breakfast. Thank you, Stu.
Yeah.
Andrea, top tips for making it through?
I think one of our portfolio founders, Juliet, the CEO and founder of FloodMap, came up with a really comprehensive risk matrix for the COVID crisis, and which I distributed with her permission to all our portfolio companies in a template form. So one, really go deep in what the risks are and plan for the worst case scenario in terms of, how long you'll need runway, all that sort of stuff. And I think in a lot of cases, that's going to be about cutting costs. And I think that a lot of times that's going to be about making really hard decisions in reducing headcount or using furloughs or reducing, salaries across the board or whatever it takes. But it's really important when you're doing that is to maintain the core capability that's going to allow you to come out the other side in a good position. So maintain your core capabilities. It's a good opportunity to get rid of people that are sub-excellent, because as we all know, startups need really excellent people. You can't afford to have anyone that's just good. And I think it's a really great opportunity to invest in your relationships with your core team and make sure that they're okay, they've got what they need to work from home. Spend extra time on your your regular kind of Zoom calls for the normal chit chat and catching up on how they are in their lives, and recognize that that's actually important. And I think it's a really fabulous opportunity to, as Matt was saying early, build those customer relationships, do what you can for them to help them, because people always remember who was there. Well, not only is it the right and the nice thing to do, but people do remember who was there for them when the shit hits the fan. And that's probably one of the most powerful investments that you can make in your customer relationships. Yeah.
So I just had one more point to make there before we move on. Is just lean on I think that's an important point, is lean on your stakeholders. You know, there's investors are here. We're keen to support, you know, whatever the requirement is, you know, I guess reaching out and not holding all the cards to your chest. So it's like, you know, investors, stakeholders, customers, like if you don't ask, you don't get. And so I guess it's just an interesting point I wanted to add, is, you know, people are there to help, and you'll be surprised at the outcomes if you do ask.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you, Stu. We're going to go to Ian now, who's going to take us through some more questions from the audience. Thanks, Ian.
This is fantastic, both the panel, but the amount of interaction in the chat is terrific. So thank you, everyone. There is a ton of questions coming in, so let's try and jump to some of them. I might ask the first one. Came in from Melbourne, so Lana Wheel, but also linked to that was John Power. So, and the questions around the actual investors in the ecosystem. So, you know, and all four of you, or all five of you in the panel, I suppose, are interacting with investors all the time. So you are sort of acting as syndicates and dealing with that. So what advice have you got for new angel investors themselves who want to support the startup ecosystem? And then linked to that was a question from John around the Launch Vic announcement yesterday in the 4 new angel groups.
I'll jump into that. Anyone who wants to start angel investing, I'm absolutely happy to have that conversation. I have lots of these conversations. I'm really transparent and open with numbers and percentages and all kinds of stuff that we know. So please reach out to me. Obviously, there's some professional syndicates here if you want to learn. But if you want to do stuff yourself, I'm happy to talk to anybody who's thinking about it.
I think that if you're new to angel investing, the most important thing to do is get up that learning curve and read, you know, Secrets of Sand Hill Road, read Venture Deals by Brad Feld, so at least you understand the terms. Even Jason Calacanis's book on how to sort of build your networks and things. So read a lot, but also make those relationships with people like Matter, and co-invest. I would strongly suggest co-investing first. 100% make sure that you adhere to the portfolio rule of statistically it's about 22 investments of equal size over a couple of years. You know, invest a lot in small pieces in a lot of different companies. Don't get tempted and excited to invest an outsized check in just one. But get up that learning curve, and a good way of doing it is co-investing with people like Matter, people like Kylie and us, and you know, our syndicates. At least then you can see you can learn from our investment office, so that we always do an analysis of what the strengths, why we're excited about an opportunity, and what the risks are that we see. And so you can learn from those questions. You can learn from the questions that the private pitches that other investors will ask that might be more experienced. And I would strongly recommend doing that before going out on your own.
Just as a pro tip, yeah, you guys can all put your fingers in your ears. You can join all of these syndicates, people. Like this I am literally involved with every single one out there, because you can add some value once you learn, and you know, deal flow comes from multiple places, and everybody has their own special set of things they talk to founders about. So, you know, I bring deal flow to people and they bring it to me, and that's what happens over time. But, you know, you don't necessarily have to, you know, align yourself with one thing if you plan on being an independent angel.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I mean, you should join all of them, because the more you see, the better you'll be. But we're also all talking to each other. Like, you know, the amount of collaboration that happens between the angel syndicates and the lead angels is pretty extraordinary, I think. And the question on the Melbourne, the 4 new groups that have been announced that have been funded by Launch Vic, 2 of them have already, you know, reached out in the early stages of that process to work, you know, to formalize how we would work together. We all know each other. You know, the more questions you ask, the more people you know, the better decisions you'll be able to make. So it's not, you know, I think a lot's said in VC about how it's collaboration, not competition. But the reality is that the VCs are competing for institutional dollars. They have to be more competitive. There's such a shortage of seed capital that we can still, for the moment, afford to be friends and truly collaborative. Like, it's just not cutthroat at this stage. Maybe it will be. Maybe in 5 years' time we'll be down here, like, you know, like ready to throw down a bit more. But for the moment, like, it truly is kumbaya. It's really nice.
It's always going to be kumbaya, I think. But and like, I think it is a wonderful part of this really early stage part of the investment ecosystem. We do co-invest. And the reason for that is because we all recognize at this really early seed stage, the angel investing stage, is that it's super high risk for investors. It's really, really high risk. And a really important way of mitigating that risk is to make sure that you write smaller checks in a larger volume of deals rather than bigger checks. And the only way that you can ensure that the startup has enough runway with the deal around is if you cooperate and collaborate and co-invest with others. So there's a strong commercial motivation for us all co-investing together, all these different syndicates co-investing together. That's great.
All right. And I should say, full disclosure, like Innovation Bay was one of those 4 groups that got picked. I mean, we're stoked with that. Launchvik's done a great job, and I think, you know, I think Andrew made the point earlier that there is a seed funding gap in the market, and this is a strong move by one of the state governments to try and fill that. I think that's super important. All right,
well done, Launchvik.
Yeah, no, awesome. Right, we've got 12 minutes or so let's try and take a few more questions. So, Alan, I'll throw this to you because we all know this person, and you can decide who to ask it to. So. It's from Rain Ong, so who's probably one of the most active angel investors out there. Hey, Rain. How has your investment thesis changed due to COVID-19?
Well, I think there are 2 kinds of startups going through the ecosystem right now. There are those that I can immediately see.
We may be having internet problems from Newport. Let me jump in and take, or sorry, Alan, who wants to answer that? So, Stu, do you want to jump on that? Sorry, Alan.
I just dropped out there.
Yeah, you did. But it's all right. We had a backup host. Asking Stu. So why don't we go through Stu and then back to you, Alan?
Look, I don't think our thesis has changed a huge amount. I mean, effectively, like, we still believe like technology as a category is an important category, and you know, without a doubt we do. In fact, like, throughout this whole period, it's been an enabler. You know, we've all seen the Zoom and all of the, you know, all the stocks, but just in general, technology across the board has helped, you know, allow us to actually live our lives during this time. But in particular, you know, there's certain models and things that we've been focused a lot more on. We like bottoms up SaaS, or like sort of product-led approach. Organic, you know, they have organic kind of acquisition of customers. We're probably shying away from you know, the burn at all costs kind of momentum investing kind of view, which is like, oh, they're just going to raise their next round, so therefore, you know, it's okay they go on a massive kind of burn over the next 12 months. Like, we're probably not subscribing to that, if, you know, in general pitches. And so sometimes that is like, you know, high level consumer businesses, etc. So things we like: product led, API, like integrations of businesses that are connecting infrastructure, especially like legacy side, like between legacy systems and kind of the technology players. And then if you can clip the ticket, like payments wise along the way. So we're kind of looking more as a category approach. And there's lots of, and then we're looking like, is there structural tailwinds behind each company? So like, you know, do we believe in the long term that it's not only a benefit now, but also over the long term? So we're definitely shying away though from the more kind of predatory investing side. You know, we're probably not looking to do many deals in the kind of distressed space, if that makes sense. So, you know, I guess we're more looking for which are the ones that are going to be emerge as winners in the long term, and kind of getting behind them, and then also supporting our direct portfolio.
Can I just jump in there and say, you know, to all the founders out there, if you have the ability to get to, you know, cash flow neutral, like, now is the time to do it. You know, if your customers, you know, if you should be charging your customers, you know, like the let's hope we can make some money later approach, I think is highly unlikely to get a check from any of us. You know, you need to have a business model that works, and if you can turn it on and start the revenue now and get to do default alive, you know, to be completely frank with all of you, I would rather invest in a startup that doesn't need my money and it really wants, you know, the help and the money to actually do something awesome, rather than just stay alive. You know, just staying alive now is a precarious place. So if you can get yourself to there at the moment by doubling down on the customers you've got, by narrowing that surface area of the problem you're solving, so you can actually guarantee that you're producing a valuable outcome for your customers. Then if you get to a point where you're cash flow neutral and you can just pedal along for a while, like it's kind of like us. If you're happy to sit there on your hands for a little while and just watch what happens, if you're the one there at the end, you may Stephen Bradbury the thing and then accelerate out the end and win. It's not a crazy approach if you can get to the point where you're not burning much cash.
Yeah, no sales revenue, no investment, right?
Yeah, I think Matt touched on something that I think is quite important that founders do, is actually think really laterally and creatively how you can support your customers without like just slash and burn discounts and freebies and things like that, restructure them, all those sorts of things, but just try. I think, revenue is the lifeblood of a company. And I think that, investors really look for that.
Although sorry, Kylie.
That's good. I was just going to come back to Rain's question, like endorsing what everyone else has said. Like we're still looking at the structural stuff, but we, as a syndicate, we don't have to write a 10-year investment plan. We can look at deals as they emerge, and that's one of the great things about being an angel investor versus being a fund. We do, however, publish annual themes just to kind of help founders with knowing what we're looking at and what we're excited about at any particular point in time. We put those out in January, and I did not see COVID coming to that extent. Then I'm not going to try and claim that I was totally all over it, because I was not. But our themes really stood up, and they were capital efficiency. To Matta's point, that's we love scrappy, hungry founders that that have a clear path to profitability, even if they choose not to take profitability at this stage. Supply chain, sustainability and efficiency, which is even more relevant in a post-COVID world, and data, that's a new word. That's like data and consumer data and privacy concerns is a real area of focus to us pre and post-COVID. So there's some sector.
Alan, I might jump in because we only have probably only got time for one more question. There's a really good question I saw just come in on the question from Tony Rothacker, and it's a slightly different topic. So Tony, thanks for this.
Startup grind, Coffs Harbour.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, welcome, Coffs Harbour. And it's about accelerators and the concept of virtual accelerators. And we're even seeing it in Australia. Like Techstars just launched a sort of sports-focused accelerator in Melbourne. It was going to be physical, so they're going to fly people. Techstars gets companies from around the world and brings them to one place. They obviously can't do that right now, so it's purely virtual. Y Combinator in San Francisco has just announced purely virtual, so you don't actually have to be physically there. So, and the question's great because it's like, is that the trend that we're going to see, with Techstars and Y Combinator, or could Australia become the sort of COVID-19 safe haven and attract some of these incredible people that want to actually be based in, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Coffs Harbour?
Yeah, so both are possible. So just last night we had an investor evening for startups in the current Remarkable program, where last night we were halfway through this year's program, and usually it's an in-person program. This year it's online. It's definitely been a learning process, but actually we've learned pretty fast, and we think the startups in the program are running pretty well. So that'll finish in another 8 weeks. And so there are a number of accelerator operators in Australia right now figuring out how to run accelerators remotely. And as usual, SaaS platform startup founders are solving a lot of our problems for us. So last night we were using a platform called Hopin, so HOPIN.TO. And I think that worked really, really well for us in providing an event that did a number of really useful things that Zoom couldn't do. The challenge, though, is one of the functions of accelerators is to help those cohort startups meet and start to bond relationships with angel investors. And as we've discussed a couple of times on this call, that's really hard to do over Zoom. So importing talent into Australia, I think, is definitely one way we can go forward. Remember, we've got to put those people through quarantine. But then, yeah, I think there's a real opportunity to do that here.
All right. Anyone else? Probably got time for one more comment. If any of the panelists are particularly passionate, just give us a wave and I'll jump to you, Matt.
I was just going to say, when I think about accelerators, I kind of have this formula, which is, your current cohort, times, the current mentor set to the power of like the alumni and the other mentors. So there's this sort of, you can kind of plug these numbers in, and that current cohort is that first variable in that equation. And I think that's something that is really, it is hard to get to do when you're not in the same place. It is really, having been involved in StartMate for a long time, when you put people in the same spot and, spin them all around and they're all tackling the same things and they're literally like bouncing around each other's desks and asking each other questions. And then, there's quiet focus time and really busy time. Like that is very hard to replicate when everyone's in their lounge room. Having to schedule, like, I think this whole thing is like, we have to schedule everything now, right? Like it's quick to schedule things, but you still got to schedule it. So the serendipity stuff is just those overheard things. So the things that we're trying to solve, with the thing you're doing next, Ian, is that, and it's like, oh, actually, I just heard somebody say that. Let's go do that thing.
Yeah. I'll leave the final word to you. Do you want to just wrap as the host, and then I'll jump in with the sort of final words?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank our panelists very much. Kylie Fraser from Eleanor, Andrea Gardner from from Gelix, Stu from 1013 and Transition, and Matt from Pick and Shovel. Thank you all very much. You all shared the talking stick much better than I expected you to. So I think the wrap up for our startup founders out there is pretty clear. Find a way to get to cash flow neutral. Don't be afraid to make the big, difficult decisions early. Be realistic. We don't really know how long this is going to last. In the meantime, if you bring a cash flow neutral or slowly growing company to angel investors, you are going to find investment in this market. But just think through, understand the investor before you approach them. Don't go in cold. Understand what they're looking for. And ideally, if you can, do it via a warm intro. Over to you, Ian.
All right. Look, thank you. I want to thank you, Alan. That was terrific. Claire, who's currently the host, you've disabled screen sharing, so I'm going to have to do this next bit with no slides, I'm afraid. But,
Sorry.
I don't know what we were quite worried about, but so next week we do have another session. Next week we've got Startup Oz 2.0, so it's the future of the ecosystem. We've got Sally Ann Williams from Cicada, Michael Butcrowd, who's the CEO at StartMate, and Phil Morrill, who is from Main Sequence Ventures. And Phil's probably he's similar vintage to me, Al, and some others out there. So he's been around forever and has been such a supporter. So that's a terrific panel. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. That's at bit.ly/IBWED27, and that's all caps. We've also got a second KPMG R&D session, so keep your eyes open for that, and that's looking at future changes in R&D legislation and regulator activity. Claire has helpfully enabled screen sharing. Thank you, Claire. That was that slide on next week and KPMG. Some of the programs we've got coming up in terms of opportunities for startups. LaunchVic, we touched on this in the questions, but we have the new Victorian Angel Club coming. So we're part of those, one of those 4 new angel groups, which is terrific. So if you're a Victorian startup, we've got the first event coming up. So please do apply. We're going to be running a virtual pitch event, investment event. We're doing that in partnership with Rampersand. So we're sort of going to be flipping through some of the investors and VCs to help with that. So second one down, if you're a fintech, applications are open for X15 Ventures, their Accelerate 2020. X15 is looking for startups who are focused on improving the financial well-being of micro and small businesses so they can come out of COVID-19 even stronger. So if you think you can help with that, check out Accelerate 2020. And finally, if you're a renewable energy startup, we are running a renewable energy founder focus, which is as it says in the tin, renewable energy. It's purely focused on that, and we're going to have some great people and investors that are getting involved there, and that's in partnership with Arena. almost done. We've done quite a few podcasts. We just put out a news special. There was tons of news, and in fact, a lot of funding news. I think there was, we touched on 11 funding rounds that were closed in the last 2 weeks in Australia, and those are just the ones that we saw. So there's probably at least double that going on. So investment activity is still there. We had Imogen Baxter from SquarePeg, Mike Dovey from IAG, and Justin Webb, who's a great entrepreneur from AgriWeb. So really entertaining session there. So check that out in the podcast. Thank you again to our incredible sponsors, Macquarie Bank, KPMG's High Growth Ventures, AWS, and Farmark Ventures. Let me stop the screen share. Now this is the point where I will say, let's jump to Discord. And if you want to experiment with our virtual networking, we'll see you in there. Fingers crossed, like, who knows? We want to hear some feedback on this. You know, is this a service that people want? Does the tech work? And what can we do better? So in the meantime, look, thank you everyone for being part of this. Thank you panelists, and Alan in particular for jumping in as the host with the most. Much better than the other Alan Jones, I have to say, much more friendly. And yeah, look, we'll see you all next time. Thank you.